Your Excellency, my very dear brother, Dr. William Samuel Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, CGH. To clap for the President. His Excellency, Professor Kithure Kindiki, EGH, the Deputy President, Honorable Dorcas Agig O Oduo, the SC-EBS Attorney General, Honorable John Mbadi Ngongo, EGH, Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury and Economic Planning, Lieutenant General John Omenda Mugaravai, Vice Chief of Defense Forces, Dr. Chris Kriptu, PhD, CBS Principal Secretary of the National Treasury and Economic Planning, Dr. Koreo Singh Oi, Principal Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Patrick Mariru, CBS Principal Secretary of Defense, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, habari za asubuhi. Your Excellency, President Ruto, I am most grateful to you, sir, for your conferring on me today the prestigious honor of the Chief of the Order of Golden Heart, CGH, Kenya's highest and most distinguished honor. I'm greatly humbled by your incredible kindness. What a great honor. What a rare privilege. What a historic recognition. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. President. It is such a joy to be back here with my dear wife and your sister, Grace, in Kenya, a nation that I love, and to be in the Statehouse with a president who is my dearest brother and friend. They say home is where your heart will always be. I consider Kenya as my home. After all, I lived and worked here in this beautiful country for about 9 years, starting from my days working with the Rockefeller Foundation and the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA. I have been back here ever since, so I can claim to have been working in and on Kenya for at least 20 years. The friendship between myself and His Excellency President Ruto goes way back over those 20 years. As we say in Kenya, tumetoka mbali, we have come from far. Yes, we have come from far, Mr. President, since you were a much younger Minister of Agriculture under the then government of President Y. Kibaki. Your predecessor, former President Kenyatta, was then the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. I recall the very frequent and engaging discussions between us on how to improve the quality of life of Kenyans. From seminars to workshops and conferences, we engaged intensely. I was not just working in Kenya, I was a Kenyan by mind, heart, and soul as I immersed myself in this beautiful country of Kenya. I remember then that I was later appointed as Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria. Then I came along with His Excellency President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan on a state visit to Kenya. President Kenyatta and yourself, as the then Deputy President, receives us together at the Jomo Kenyatta Airport. As President Jonathan was making the introductions of his ministers, he got to me and he introduced me as the Minister of Agriculture of Nigeria, to which the then President Kenyatta said, "Yes, I know him. He is the Kenyan on loan to the Nigerian government." We all busted out collectively laughing. Of course, he was right, because even then, as I was appointed Minister of Agriculture of Nigeria, I appointed Maria Mulindi, a Kenyan, as my Chief of Staff, even in Nigeria. I worked everywhere in Kenya, and I have great memories. From my praying and preaching at the Nairobi Pentecostal Church, Valley Road, with Bishop Boniface Adoyo, Bishop Oginde, and many others, to small family prayer groups with my Kenyan friends, to working with many farmers and schools across Kenya. From working with a friend of mine, Robert Mbugua, speaking across high schools in this country to encourage and inspire the youth, to supporting research institutions, including Kenya's Agricultural Research Institute, the African Economic Research Consortium, with Dr. Harris Muley, Professor Willis Oluokosura, Professor Chris Okelo Ogutu, and Dr. Gem Agwins Kodak, to working with the corporate giants in this country, such as Chris Gribbie, who owned the International House, and Vimal Shah of Bidco Oil Refineries. From working to support girls' education with the Forum for Women Educationalists in Africa with Dr. Eda Gachukia and Dr. Ruth Kagia, to working to improve the lives of farmers across this country, from Bungoma to Eldoret, Kisii, and across the Rift Valley. From working with the Kenyan Agricultural Research Institute, KARI, to develop new technologies, to working on the farms in Muranga with Dr. Florence Wambugu, to scale up the uptake of tissue culture bananas by farmers in the country. I recall my work launching the development of agro-dealer networks across Kenya with Dr. Caleb Wangia of the then Agricultural Market Development Trust, AGMAC, as we rapidly expanded availability of farm inputs for traders across Kenya. I was so driven and so much wanted things to change positively for Kenyans. I was very concerned then about the millions of poor farmers in Kenya who are begging for food and who had no access to seeds or fertilizers. I wanted to see a national program to provide subsidized seeds and fertilizers for poor farmers across Kenya. The then PS of Agriculture, Dr. Romano Kiome, and the then Minister of Agriculture, Kiproto Arab Kruwa, became allies then and agreed. But it was not a popular move. Several donors were unhappy with me at the time for trying to push for subsidies for farmers in Kenya, including my own office at the time, the Rockefeller Foundation. I was even told that if I did not back off, I could lose my job. I was not deterred. So I said, if trying to help the poor is a reason to lose a job, I cannot think of a better way, a more honorable way to lose a job, fighting for the poor. I recall going to one of the meetings of donors at the time to push for this. And as soon as I raised the issue, the chair of the session simply said, "Next agenda item, please." I retorted that if I had been the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kenya, I would have sent all of you back home because you spend most time on the beaches and not even having a heart for the poor people of Kenya. When His Excellency William Ruto was then appointed as the Agricultural Minister, I asked for an urgent meeting with him. You need to know something about this man, the then Minister Ruto, now President Ruto of this country. He is a man of action. He is relentless, and he will push until he gets things done, but he does get it done. He did not wait to visit with me, for me to visit with him at the Kilimo House. He made his way to my own office and met me there at 7:30 in the morning. That was how collectively myself and him, we developed and rolled out what is called the Kilimo Plus program to provide subsidized farm inputs for over 2.5 million poor farmers in the country. We went even further, myself and the President, then Minister Ruto, when I was at Agra, developed and rolled out what is called the Kilimo Biashara program, which provided financial guarantees, facilities for banks across this country to reduce the risk of lending by commercial banks to Kenya. It worked to Kenyan farmers. It worked so well that it was supported. It supported many banks, such as Equity Bank, working with James Mwangi to rapidly expand their lending to the agricultural sector, from its humble beginning to becoming what it is today, for which I am very, very proud. And Mr. President, thank you for your tenacity at that time, because without your support and tenacity, this will not have happened. I recall my work with Kenyan colleagues as we developed at the time what was called the Kenyan Agricultural Commodity Exchange, with Adrian Mukibi, Albert Wesonga, to provide market price information for farmers in the country using mobile phones. I remember working with the mayor of Bungoma at the time to set up the commodity exchange in a place called Chwele, or Chwele Market, so farmers could bulk their maize and sell graded maize with quality at the exchange, working at the time with a guy called Eusebius Mukwana, who was then later a senator. I worked so well as the middleman could not rip off farmers anymore, Mr. President. In fact, it worked so well that some disgruntled middlemen vandalized some of the commodity kiosks. One day, Mr. Kofi Annan, the then United Nations Secretary General, he was at the time the chairman of the boards of directors a board of directors of Agra visited the jewelry market. He was so amazed, Mr. President, as he used his mobile phone to make orders via the exchange. He turned to me and he said, "This is the Chicago Board of Exchange in Village in Kenya." I tried so hard to be Kenyan, so much so that I started running at the Jaffrey Center in the early mornings and on weekends. If only I could run like those long-distance runners of Kenya, maybe I could become a Kenyan by running. And I failed miserably, as I could not keep up with them. So I told myself, Mr. President, let me just stick being a Nigerian. At least I know that Nigerians may have a better opportunity of beating you in the football, because I know that the field is too short for Kenyans to run in football. As the president of the African Development Bank, I am proud that my colleagues and I have been running with Kenya and scoring development goals with Kenya. Kenya has, Mr. President, a special place in the history of the African Development Bank since its establishment in 1964. The very first project ever financed by the African Development Bank was right here in Kenya in 1967, and that's 58 years ago. The first one links Eldoret to Tororo in Uganda, laying the foundations for a transport infrastructure that drives commerce between the countries of the Great Lakes and the Indian Ocean regions. The second road, which connects Nairobi to Kilimanjaro region in Tanzania, has become a major trunk road for commerce and tourism between both countries. Since 1964, Mr. President, the bank has financed a total of 167 projects with financial commitment of $7.8 billion US. But I am especially proud of what we have done in and for Kenya over the past 10 years since I was first elected president of the African Development Bank in 2015. Since I was elected president, the bank has financed a total of 57 projects with a total financing commitment of $4.44 billion US. That means, Mr. President, we did in the past 10 years under my presidency, 57% of all of the African Development Bank's financing in Kenya over the last 60 years. And I must tell you how special Kenya is to me. The African Development Bank's current portfolio consists of 45 projects worth $4.1 billion. And these projects, Mr. President, are having huge impact across Kenya. For example, the bank supported last mile connectivity project for electricity has helped to increase the population of Kenyans connected to the national electricity grid from 41% in 2014 to 76% in 2024. Put simply, the electricity connections increased from 2.42 million households to 9.7 million households. Many of you may not know that the bank helped to make this happen. You are not alone. On one of my field trips to the Rift Valley together with Cabinet Secretary then at the time, Charles Kitter, we walked down a dusty road in one of the villages that benefited from the last mile connectivity project. Right in front of us was an elderly woman whose name was Grace, not my Grace, that's my wife. She was asked by the Cabinet Secretary if she knows the African Development Bank funded the connection of our village and other villages and households to the electricity grid. She said, "I do not know the African Development Bank." When further asked if she knows Dr. Adesina, the president of the African Development Bank, she said, "No, I do not know him, and where is he?" Of course, I was right beside her. She then said, "All I know is that we once were in darkness, and now we have light." With Kenya participating, Mr. President, under you in the Mission 300 launched by the African Development Bank and the World Bank to connect 300 million people to electricity by 2030, Kenya is definitely on course to achieving 100% access to electricity by 2030. Ni naamini tutatoboa. The African Development Bank financed and was the lead mandatory arranger for the 310 megawatts Lake Turkana project, which is the largest wind farm in Africa. The bank also financed the 105 megawatts Menengai geothermal power plant for the advancing Kenya's leadership in geothermal development in Africa. For power transmission, The bank provided $106 million for the recently completed Ethiopia-Kenya Electricity Highway project. The African Development Bank is supporting several road and transport projects that are improving regional connectivity, trade, and reducing travel costs for the population. Let me mention just a few. Take, for example, right here in Nairobi, the bank is proud to have provided $107 million for the rehabilitation of the 13 kilometers Nairobi Outer Ring Road, turning it from a single lane to a dual carriageway, including service roads, grade separated intersections, pedestrian foot overbridges, walkways, bicycle lanes, while providing secondary access to the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. The bank co-financed the $175 million expansion of the Thika Nairobi Road, expanding it into a 6- and 8-lane highway. This has drastically reduced travel time from 2 to 3 hours to just 30 to 45 minutes. The bank has approved $852 million for the ongoing regional integration operations in Kenya. This includes Bagamoyo, Tanga, Horohoro, Lunga, Malindi Road, connecting, Mr. President, Kenya and Tanzania. We are supporting Kapchowa, Swamp, Kitale Road, connecting Kenya and Uganda, as well as the Lesuru, Kitale roads, connecting Kenya and South Sudan. The bank financed the construction of the Addis Ababa, Nairobi, Mombasa highway that has reduced travel time between Ethiopia and Kenya from 3 days to less than 24 hours and has helped to expand trade between the two countries by 400%. The bank co-financed the dualization of the 84 kilometers Kenol-Sagna Marua highway, part of the Kenyan section of the Trans-Africa Highway running from Cape to Cairo. Our support of $31 million for the Chibora-Eldoret Road rehabilitation project, part of the Northern Corridor, provides transport routes connecting Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, East Congo, and Southern Sudan. Mr. President, you are very passionate about water and sanitation. When I visited with you in May of last year, right here at the Statehouse, when you graciously hosted the African Development Bank's annual meetings, you passionately requested of me that the bank expand support for water and sanitation in the country. Mr. President, I am pleased to let you know that the bank is providing $634 million now towards the Kenya Town's Sustainable Water Supply and Sanitation Project. This includes €315 million for the construction of the Twake Multipurpose Water Dam, expected to be completed in July of 2026 under your presidency. When completed, it will provide 150,000 cubic meters of water per day and to about 1.3 million people in Kitui and Makueni counties, as well as Konsa Techno City in Machakos County. Mr. President, the bank is strongly supporting your efforts in private sector in Kenya. This includes the provision of $700 million in lines of credit to more than 8 commercial banks, including the Equity Bank Group, the Commercial Bank, Diamond Trust Bank, the Credit Bank, Commercial Bank of Africa, Family Bank, and the Kenya Mortgage Refinancing Company. I know, Mr. President, because I pray for you all the time. I know that Kenya faces a huge challenge with high unemployment for its youth, as manifested in several youth riots that shook Kenya. Unemployment is especially high among Kenya's well-educated youth. They demand support for skills upgrade, finance to build their businesses, and social protection, as well as inclusion in governance systems. Support you as you support the youth of Kenya. The African Development Bank is providing $309 million for ongoing projects targeting skills development for the youth. This includes the support for technical and vocational education that has already benefited 88,000 young people in Kenya. Mr. President, the African Development Bank's flagship program for supporting the financing of women, the Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa, otherwise called AFAWA, has already provided a total of $177 million in loans for 3,177 women-owned businesses. One of such women businesses is Pauline Otila, the CEO of Apiculture Ventures, one of the fastest growing businesses in Kenya's honey industry. With support received from AFAWA right here in Kenya, Pauline has tripled her business and grew her beekeepers network, supply network, from 1,200 to 10,000 beekeepers today. Today, Pauline is one of the leaders in Kenya's male-dominated beekeeping industry, showing that when women are supported, they thrive. In her words, women are bankable if given a chance. And I know, Mr. President, you are very passionate about supporting women. And I fully agree with you, and I salute your leadership. Because no bird can fly with one wing. I am convinced that when women win, Kenyans win. When women win, Africa wins. Yes, challenges may be here today, but let's keep hope alive. Kenya will grow. Kenya will thrive. Kenya will prosper. I believe that the future will be bright for the youth of Kenya. And that is why the African Development Bank is currently preparing for our board's approval, financial support to Kenya for the establishment of the Youth Entrepreneurship Investment Bank of Kenya. This will be a standalone financial institution with 100% dedication, providing technical assistance, debt and equity financing for the businesses of the youth of Kenya. When I earlier discussed this with His Excellency President Ruto, we were both at an airport lounge in Dubai. Both of us coming from different trips. He said to me, Adesina, as he always calls me, I want this in Kenya like yesterday. And true to his words, within 48 hours, I received a formal letter of request from President Ruto for the African Development Bank to support the establishment of the Youth Entrepreneurship Investment Bank of Kenya. So to the youth of Kenya, you are not alone. The African Development Bank and our partners will work very closely with President Ruto and the government to boost opportunities for the youth in Kenya. Working with President Ruto and the government of Kenya, the goal is simple: build youth-based wealth in Kenya, as the president told me. So as you can see, Mr. President, today, my heart has always been in Kenya. I am therefore immensely honored by you, President Ruto, that you are conferring on me today, and you have conferred on me today, Kenya's highest and most distinguished privilege for the rest of my life. It will be a constant reminder that the country that I love so much, Kenya, loves me back, appreciates and celebrates my leadership at the African Development Bank, and values and honors the incredible contributions of my staff and colleagues, our board directors at the African Development Bank. On behalf of my dear wife and your sister, Grace, the boards of directors of the African Development Bank, our board of governors, the management and staff of the African Development Bank, and on my own behalf, I accept this honor with great humility. May God bless you, my dearest brother, President Ruto. Asante sana, Mheshimiwa Rais Ruto. May God bless the good people of Kenya. Mungu aibariki Kenya. God bless Africa. Mungu aibariki Africa. With all my heart, now the golden heart. Thank you very much. Asante sana.